Hi, this is Aaron Azarod, and welcome to the 168th episode of the Truth Island podcast. Popularity, much like money, is one of those things that most people secretly desire, but have almost no understanding of how to achieve. If one were to examine the high school they attended and studied the commonalities amongst those who were popular, they might see some familiar archetypes, such as the athletic jock, the very attractive girl, and the risk-taking rebel as to the qualities we deem valuable in other people. However, upon becoming an adult, the waters towards popularity become a lot more confusing. Yes, being an exceptional athlete and earning $1 million sports contract is one option. However, such a path remains far too narrow for most people to excel, leading others to branch off into different directions. For example, a stand-up comedian who was considered unpopular in high school might be able to rebrand himself as a staunch realist who speaks the mind of the people, whereas the avenues of such an identity would not have been made available to him back when he was an adolescent. However, one of the more troubling aspects of popularity, which plagues the adult world just as much as it did in high school, is the types of individuals who gain people's attention. A person may have tons of social media followers because of their dangerous skateboard videos, but may not actually be a good person and is able to take advantage of their popularity in one domain in order to influence people in another. Politicians, actors, and other celebrities might also become popular not because they have superior acting chops or wise things to say, but simply because they are very good at creating controversy and are involved in riveting dramas. Indeed, being popular is not always about being inherently superior at something, but rather simply getting people interested in you for better or worse. Helping me to find out what it takes to become popular, I am once again joined by Kenny. Kenny, let me start off by asking you this. If you were given 3 million Instagram followers and people were tracking your every move, would you take it?
Yes.
Brave man. You don't think for a moment it's one of those be careful with what you wish for Twilight Zone things?
No, not really. I don't think it would be too much of an effect for me because I mean besides the mad rush of power, which I do like, I love power. So
I'm hearing some of the darker side of Kenny, and I,
love
I kind
power.
of, I kind of intrigued by it. Go ahead, go continue, man.
Call me your supreme looter, emperor. Yeah, I think I think it's not so much the object, but how one interacts with the object. So the circumstance is the same way. Circumstance is not so much the problem. It can be, but it's much more. It's the real issue is how we deal with it.
Okay, I kind of have another approach to this. I'm not saying that I would reject the influence, but if I'm being realistic with myself, I do see the possibilities of how it could transform me in some very negative ways. I'm not saying that I'm a sponge and I'm completely vulnerable to the whims of other people, but I can imagine the psychological impact of having thousands, perhaps even millions of people telling you to do something or commenting and questioning why you did something. And I'm not saying that it would fully get under my skin and transform me as a human being, but I have to leave some room open to that because and I'm only saying that because I've actually never experienced such a dramatic thing in my life. So I can't say with the utmost confidence that I would just be like, yep, I'm just going to be continuing doing what I'm doing, and these millions of people screaming at me every day is going to have zero impact on my mental health. I can't say with full assurance. I'm wondering how can you be so confident in yourself that it wouldn't impact you in any such way?
Well, to put it lightly for you, Aaron, I just don't give a crap. Um, I think I can say that it wouldn't affect me because how you say I this is well because I know that and this is basically my I went to an all boys school. You say a boarding school when I was about maybe 16 years old to the age of I think 18 or 19 and no 18, graduated at 18 and came to America at 19, so 18. And I this was it. It's a boarding school. You're surrounded with people who either like you or dislike you, don't have any reason to, boys don't really have reasons to filter themselves a lot of the time. And so you deal with those kinds of pressures in the sense of when, if you goof, you're going to know you're going to know you goofed. And is usually either some sort of how you say, there's also always some sort of consequence, either social consequences or getting taxed. So I'm fairly used to having to being in a high social and high pressure social environments, and I don't doesn't disturb me anymore.
Okay, I 100% believe you. And I think if there was a man to actually pull this off, you're actually the guy. I want to throw some other, hey, I believe in you. I believe in you. Don't give me that look. I believe in you. But I wanna like throw some more angles at you. Just I want to see how you deflect them.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
sure.
let's just say you're given 3 million YouTube followers, Instagram followers. People are buying your book. They love you. They can't get enough of Kenny. They want to follow you on Twitter. And you have influence. What you say goes, and you are making money off of this, right? A lot of people who have popularity, they're able to kind of turn that into revenue, right? The more viewers you have, the more whatever. It's a model.
Yeah.
Kenny starts doing what Kenny does and what he feels is right. We go from 3 million to 2.5, then 2 million, then 1.5. And those numbers, like people are just talking and they're like, man, I think if only he would just do this, and it just starts dwindling down. And
Mhm.
now your livelihood and your revenue is also because in high school, you can be like, all right, whatever, I just don't have any friends, no big deal. Like you can go about your life. What
Mhm.
happens if it's like directly impacting your livelihood or your way about you? Does that get under your skin at all, or you just watch your popularity go from 3 million to zero and you have no break? It doesn't even like phase you one bit if that happens.
Well, I think absolutely it's going to be a phase. There's going to be a phasing of me. It's going to phase me for sure. But I don't think it'll last long. It'll be, I think, a matter of a maximum a day, because at the end of the day, it's like how you say, I just I don't think I don't think that it is possible for me to be anxious about most things, especially something like that, for more than a day. And just because I know that this is just the way of this is the way of life. A couple of years ago, I realized something. Many years ago, actually, I think I was still in my early 20s. I realized something, and I realized that when you get an answer right in class, when you get an answer right in class, it's all the more pressure to get the next answer right again. Because now, if you get the second answer wrong, it's much more embarrassing. If you got the first answer wrong, that's okay. It's still embarrassing, but it's not as embarrassing as getting it right and then getting it wrong. So there's this desire, especially with this what we call crackers, very smarty pants kind of guys, right? They always want to get the answer right, and the more they get it right, the more terrified they are to get it wrong. I learned this many years ago, and the antidotes is simple. The antidote is neither it's not getting things wrong on purpose. It's not hiding what you actually think. Um, the antidote is being fairly honest about yourself from the very beginning. If I have 3 million followers, I hope that they know who I am. If they don't, I suspect that most people won't really. It'll just be a matter of following who's following and following the followers and so forth. But um, the point is simply to be fairly honest from the very beginning, so people know exactly what you're getting up front. You're going to get some answers right, you're going to get some answers wrong. But honesty has a way of safeguarding you, because most people feel the dread of embarrassment because they've pretended to be the person who can do no wrong, who can say nothing, who can never get it wrong. And so it's double the punishment when you do get it wrong. So when it comes to situations like that, where the popularity and people who are, yeah, popularity, and especially when your popularity is linked to your stream of income, it can be very hard. But this is the way of life. They love you today and they hate you tomorrow.
Okay, final question I'm going to ask you before we move on. If you have a belief on something or a stance on something, and 3 million people disagree with you, and you read the comments, and okay, let's say there's some like dummies in there, like, and he's really stupid, right? Like, we can ignore those guys, right? Do you think that if there's 3 million people telling you something, in that mix, there'll be enough intelligent people that might actually just shake you a little bit? Because I always say, well, if 3 million people are telling me something, I do have to fundamentally ask myself that question of like, can these 3 million people be wrong? You know, and like, it is possible. It could be the case that 3 million people are wrong and I'm right. But you would have to have like a really robust, sense of self in order to like say in the affirmative, I am correct and the 3 million people are wrong. Do you think there's any possibility that some of those people in that herd would be able to like, when I say get under your skin, I don't mean irritate you, but perhaps convert you over with some kind of higher moral superior reasoning? Do you see that could possibly happening just by sheer probability?
No, it's not possible, not for me. And here's why. This is very important because I think I've had conversations with one of my closest friends, and this is the one of my closest friends, and we've had this conversation repeatedly about what truth and numbers, the relationship between truth and numbers. Many years ago, we came to the understanding and conclusion that truth has very little to do with numbers. Sometimes truth and numbers, how you say, coincide. They work together. They're on the same path. But often you find that truth and numbers are not on the same path. Because over the years, you find that, as people grow up, begin to have different interests. You find that a young lady who was very interested in her doll when she was 9, 10, or 12 even, is no longer interested in her doll. She's not interested in taking selfies and twerking on video. And you find that people who were once interested in, learning for the sake of learning and understanding for the sake of understanding, just like that young girl has put down the doll, has picked up something else. They too put down their earnest desires and begin to learn simply for, for social cachet and things like that. So my point is that human beings have different motivations for things. And because of that, human beings are not to be trusted. A human being is only trustworthy when a human being has proven himself to be trustworthy. So that being said, the only one can actually trust from the very get-go is one's own self. It's just that simple. Now, one's own self can peer into the minds of others, either through conversation or books or film and so forth. But the peering does not necessarily mean one must agree with them. One is only peering to, to learn something, to see what they, to balance, to learn and to balance, to push and pull what's true, what's not true. And it's important that one does this reasonably. And we say, well, how can one man take it upon himself to know what is true all by himself? I say it's absolutely possible. Reality does that. Reality does that. Reason does that. Revelation does that. Should I say, if I were to put a caveat on that, critically thought through revelation, right? Just because somebody comes and tells me that, the president of France only wears a chicken costume, and I've been to France. Well, he's been to France. That may be true, but he may be lying about the other part, So I think that my desire to know things and to understand reality has very little to do with numbers. So I've been like this for many years, to the point where most of the people I meet, most of the people who come to my home for dinner, don't agree with me on a lot of things. And if they're people of humor, we end up getting along very well, because it's not a matter of contention. It's just a matter of enjoying each other. Oh, it's just Kenny and his crazy ideas. But if they're not people of humor, they end up hating me, because there is no way in any way whatsoever that I will bend the knee to them. And I don't expect them to bend the knee to me. I don't talk and argue for people to change their minds. I talk and argue so we can have a good time. It's more enjoyable when we can chat and feign disagree, feign, I should say,
Civility?
No, no, not feign civility, but feign. Uh, uh, it's like a situation where two friends seem to be exasperated with the ideas of others of the other, but they're not really exasperated with it. It's just part of the camaraderie.
Mm-mm.
So that's when we throw childish insults at one another.
I call it healthy exhaustion. Healthy.
It's a healthy exhaustion. I like that. So yeah, there is no. I don't see it. But I will say this to be honest, to be completely honest. It it will make me sit down and make sure that my calculations are correct. It will make me do that. It will not make me say, "Oh, they must be right because they're this many." No, no, no. I will say, "Okay, I've thought through this before. Let me look at it once more just to make sure." I look at it again, make sure that my arithmetic is right, and if it's right, it's right.
Wow, I no, I actually really love the robustness of your like sense of self. I think it's actually something to strive towards. I think if I was in that similar situation, I wouldn't necessarily just cave to the mob immediately, but I think I would cherry pick the best representatives of that mob, like the most eloquent, well spoken, most knowledgeable on that subject, and kind of maybe cherry pick their voices and be like, all right, there's 3 million people here. Some of them are just saying utter complete garbage, 100%. What if there's a real scientist that's in this mass? What if there is like a real person who has, subject area expertise and they're pointing out something that I have missed? I think I would be open to that, of just cherry picking the best voices from that mass. It doesn't mean I would change my mind. It doesn't mean I would fold like a deck of cards, but I don't know what it is about myself. Maybe I'm not fully cemented in my identity, but I suppose when I go about life, I always leave room for error in just the way I live my life. And maybe there's something wrong with that. Maybe I'm too open-minded. I don't really have the answer to it, but I always like, I'm sure of myself, but I always leave that like 5% room margin of error of like, okay, maybe someone is seeing something that I'm not seeing, just because I want to have a more complete and more full view of what's going on around me. And there's just thing as being a single individual, as a single human, I just feel like I can't see everything at once. It's just not possible for any one man to do.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I have I've thought about that, and the only conclusion that I can come to is that I don't know what I don't know until I know it, and until I know it, I don't know. It's just that simple. A is not non A. Non A is not A as A is not non A. And so and I cannot pressure myself into because I believe in freedom. I cannot, pressure myself into feeling this either dread or the anxiety of not knowing and believing that someone else may know greater than I do. But that's the thing is about being a human being is having the humility to admit when someone has brought something to light that you did not see. That's why it's good to have good friends, close friends, people who are pursuing in all things, whatever it is to pursue, with truth and with truth. And I can understand that, but it doesn't bother me not knowing. Not knowing is not the problem, but doing accordingly with what I do know. Now that's the challenge. Not knowing, there will always be a not knowing. One cannot know all things, but one can know some things, and one can know how you say, and one can know things that one did not previously know before. So, but these things take time, and so, if it depends on how you see life, sometimes I like to believe I will know what I need to know when I need to know it. It'll come to me uh, like the lady in red. But please go on.
Uh, it's no secret that one of my favorite philosophers is Socrates. However, I will say this about him. I would have liked if he got just maybe once or twice, he just utterly got his butt kicked by somebody else. And like, I just feel like, again, like he's totally the man. He's like heavyweight champion. He's like 50-0. But if he was like 48-2, I would actually have even more respect with him because I'm like, The man lost that battle and he did it like a champ. He like went down with grace because I do think because I like to see like it's really exhilarating to see someone win all the time, but I like to also see how they lose because what I'm studying is when they definitively lose, do they lose with grace? And that's actually something that's very important to me of like, because there are people in this world, they're right about a lot of stuff. And then they do fall into a bear trap where they happen to be wrong on that particular issue and they still double down like, no, 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 and I'm like, man, I would have so much more respect for you if you would just lose with grace. That's all I'm saying is that, and I like to see that because I think it's easy to keep winning and it's awesome and it makes you look manly and powerful and all that jazz. But to lose with grace is also something that's really, really, really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like I believe that. I see it in a different category. I don't see it as losing. And oh my, so I say, well, okay, of course I don't see it as losing. Yeah, it's just because you're a jackass. Yeah, I am, but it's not just that. it's is that I've never entered an argument or entered a conversation with a mind of winning or losing. To be honest with you, and if I did, if I have, it's been a very long time. Whenever I enter a conversation or an argument, it's really just to have fun. I kid you not. It's enjoyment. It's literally is enjoyment. And I think that it is not possible. That's why the categories, if they do exist, they're faded. They're very faded. It's not possible, or if it's not, if it's just it's very difficult to, even when you're quote unquote losing, to see it as losing because you're having too much fun.
Oh, I think that's the best way to go about it because if your points of view are personally tied to who you are, it's going to sting a lot more. Whereas, as Ben Franklin said, I love one of the piece of advice that Ben Franklin gives. He says, when you're bringing up like a proposition, always say, suppose this happens, or what if this happens, or some might say. So when you're like kind of putting these points of view out there into the atmosphere, you're not personally saying, I believe this, or I believe every child should do blah, blah, blah. Because when you use those I statements, if the idea gets shot down, you're getting shot down. But if you throw those ideas out there with like, some might think that it's wise to do this or that, if that idea gets shot down, it's not, you're not really feeling as much shrapnel, being thrown back at you because you're just putting those things out there as other possibilities or other ideas that you may or may not subscribe
Yeah.
to. Some might call that a bit cowardly, but I definitely see the wisdom in that.
Well,
Okay.
can be called cowardly.
I want to talk about the popular people that we have in our world today. And I actually think that they are quite different than you and I in many respects. So I think that from our stories of antiquity, I'm going to kind of generalize and put antiquity in this wonderful golden era bow. In the past, somebody, I think like a good example of this would be like William Wallace, right? Who fought the British. You can picture Mel Gibson going all crazy and whatnot. In the past, you became popular by having a very strong identity in yourself, just as you described in the beginning of this podcast, believing in a cause that you believe to be true. Other people try to tear you down. And again, William Wallace, Socrates, all of these men fit this archetype of like, I believe in myself. I believe in the cause that I'm fighting for. I face opposition. I overcome that opposition. And then eventually people first reject me, but then in the end they come and see it my way, or they make me drink poison and kill me. Either way, like that's the typical archetype of a popular person, a young squire who grows up to be king, goes through that kind of trajectory. They're rejected, but they believe so much in themselves. And it's also, some might argue, some might also tie this with some belief in in God as well. Like, I believe in myself, I believe in God, I believe in my purpose. I'm completely robust in that. I'm unshakable. And if I'm an unmovable object, eventually the world will have to gravitate around me because I'm not moving. So all the other planets need to eventually get behind me because I'm the unshakable object.
Mm.
Where I know, and that's like these are cool, awesome like myths and stories. I see things in the modern world as being quite different. I see our influences, our leaders, our leading politicians, our celebrities, they're sniffing around at what other people are interested in and trying to cash in on that. And this is a very interesting time that we live in because in antiquity, you were a robust person, you believed in something new and you went with it. Now we're starting to live in a world where people who believe in themselves are unpopular and ignored and considered strange and weird, whereas the people who are able to ride the gravy train, those are the people that seem to be experiencing the most success in our world. Do you agree with my assessment, or have I gone off the deep end here?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's. I think you're right. It's because the gravy train is, it's a popular train. So if you ride the popular train, you'll become popular. It's that simple. If you don't subscribe to the gravy train and want to build your own bloody tracks, well, good luck with that. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. There is a path now. It's not a true path. It's not a, and it's not really not a. It's not even a glorious path in the sense of beauty or height. So it's a base, but a popular path nonetheless. Yeah.
I'm gonna argue that there is a lot of danger with this new path that we're headed in because we have a lot of people who have power and influence, but they lack the thing that you described in the very beginning, and that's a robustness in themselves and a robustness in what they believe in. And people, why is that so dangerous, Aaron? It's because it makes them extremely feckless and it makes them extremely fickle when pressed against adversity. So let's just say I'm a politician and I say whatever it is that will make me popular. Okay, it works for a little bit, like free this, free that. But the second that I'm pressed with some kind of adversity, I'm gonna like, because the problem is that if you're a popularity chaser, when you lose 1 million subscribers, it's a disaster. It's like a nuclear warhead went off. And now you're pivoting, you're changing. And this kind of I think that this impairs society to actually confront challenges, say controversial things, take a hit for your belief. And I think that this kind of stagnates human progress. I think that if our thought leaders are completely beholden to whatever is in vogue, where are we going to get these courageous figures that are going to propel society forward?
They'll be there, but they'll have a tougher climb. They'll have a different, how you say, it'll be hard to find them, but they will be there. You can't you can't really stifle and destroy. You can, but it's hard to do it. Originality and people who are this kind of person. It takes quite a deal. It takes quite a bit of um, power to deal with people like this, in the sense of people who think for themselves, people who are their own man or quotes their own woman. The point is simply that they're there, it's going to be much harder for them to make a path or make a way in this world, at least in the popular sense.
Now, the other thing I want to kind of talk about is people who might be obtaining popularity for the wrong reasons. And and obviously this triggers me, and I think of like horrific moments in high school where if let me ask you this question, Kenny, would you say that the most popular students in your high school were the most morally upright good people, or would you say that's not true?
Oh no, that was not the case for my high school. No.
Yeah, absolutely. And same thing with my high school, right? If we look at popularity in the context of high school or middle school or whatever it is, so I alluded to in my intro that the people who are popular in a high school context, if you're a guy, You're typically really good. You're a risk taker, brazen, bold, brave, good at athletics, and basically you're like a macho kind of guy. And that doesn't mean you could be a decent human being and have a moral compass about you, or you could not. But if you can have those characteristics, there's definitely popularity to be had. For a girl, I hate to say it, like a lot of it has to do with her looks and so forth, and the attention that she might get for boys, or some of the dramas that she might be entangled in might, create like a captivating story arc for her. But seldom, I would say on a very seldom basis, is it the, nerdy kid who's like studying biology all day or whatever that's the most popular kid of the school. And okay, hopefully things are changing. Probably not though, right? And okay, fine. Aaron, what's your, get over it, man. Like that's high school. You're a grown man now. Just don't worry about that. And I say, okay, fair enough. Hey, man, adolescents don't really know what they want and they might be into foolish things. Totally, totally understand that. I'm starting to see the same metrics of popularity starting to bleed into the adult atmosphere as well. Whereas there was this notion that we all had in our mind of like, okay, this was, I'll give you an example, like in the movie, like Back to the Future, that guy, Biff, for example, he's the most popular guy in high school because of, he has like the tough macho cachet, but then when he's like older, he's just like an overweight adult who's failed at life or something like that, right? I'm starting to see the inverse of this, where people of not the brightest, not the smartest, not the most morally upright, still having command of popularity, still having command over people's eyes, and they're doing it in ways of like attracting controversy, saying the most provocative things, being involved in some riveting drama that makes headlines. And in some ways, this has always been the case. This has been going on since ancient Rome. But I think that it's getting very dangerous because, okay, adolescents can be into stupid things. That's the nature of being an adolescent. What happens when we as adults are still into stupid people and in, immature ideas and immature people?
Well, we reap the consequences. The nation suffers, children suffer, or we ourselves suffer, and we reap the consequences. It's difficulty upon difficulty, because there is a time and a way for people to grow up, but we don't believe that, and so you find quote unquote adults who don't know how to put their lives together. And because of that, they're miserable. They'll never admit that that's why they're miserable, because they've always been told that they're special and anything and everything they want to do is wonderful. But they're miserable. Today, America is a very depressed nation. Very depressed nation. Can you imagine? This is a place with fast cars. It's a place with great roads. It's a place with food everywhere. I mean, literally food everywhere. Like you can literally walk into McDonald's and buy a burger for I think about $3, one burger. There's a television in every home. So America is a very powerful and very beautiful and very affluent nation, yet its people are unhappy. It's people, this is if scientists could figure this out for me, I'd be very happy. I'd be very happy that the people who have everything are unhappy.
So I think we have a chicken and egg type situation here, whereas are people just following what they think will make them popular? And that could be foolish nonsense, like, oh, people are, into this foolish nonsense, I'm going to do it. Or do you think that maybe there's something darker about us as humans, that we actually do value foolish nonsense, we do value controversy, we do value these kind of troublesome, like, shock provoking characters? Because like I'm confused. I don't know if people are just following the honey, or if that's truly our honey. Like we truly are like, our honey is these kind of really interesting characters that get involved in all of these controversies and say these outlandish things, and it's one drama after the next. Because we definitely have a lot of like boring, wise, smart people. There's no shortage of them. A lot of smart, boring, wise people that we could be following, and yet we choose not to. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. Is this like ingrained in our nature where we're attracted to drama and we kind of prioritize that off, where we're kind of drawn to those candy bars and we're just like neglecting our vegetables? Or do you think just temporarily our values are a bit out of alignment?
I think it's a bit of both. I never had to train my son out of being something good. I always had to train him out of being something bad, and badness comes quite easily to him. He
Wow.
knows. You know what I mean? It's just this is what it means to raise a child, is to teach them what is good and to remove from them, to turn them away from what is bad. And you see that children don't need you to teach them about bad; they already know it. So I think there's a part of us, that just really that's a bit savage, like very upside down. Then I do think that we what we feed grows. We fed over the years, growing up and all that. We fed a lot of horrible things in our lives, you know. So it gets to the points where we can actually only enjoy the things that are horrible. There are certain people here who cannot have a conversation that has a conversation with a mate, or with a girlfriend for they have a conversation for about 4 hours, and it's literally all about the people they've had sex with. That's it. That's literally all it's about. And you're looking at yourself, you're saying, these are two grown adults. These are two grown people. These are adults, right? Two grown people, matured in the eyes of the world. They can vote, and they can go to war, right? They can pick up arms and go to war. These are adults. Some of them have children. And you're wondering to yourself, what is this about? I say, well, what's wrong with spending 6 hours talking about, people you've had sex with? And I say, well, if you have to ask me that question, there your view of humanity is very low. It's very low. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's that it's how you say it's not even it's like buying a Ferrari and using it as a tractor, as a work as a, as a farm car.
Hmm.
You have no idea what it's worth. You have no idea what the hell you're doing. You know. My point is that human beings, our minds we're pretty capable of things, but we find that because I think we're a bit upside down, and I think that we fed a lot of bollocks in our youth. I find that, yeah, we see the world not as it ought to be seen, but as we want to see it. And often we are the center of our universe. So you have situations where people are literally taking selfies of themselves and falling off of cliffs because they wanted to take a picture of themselves. They put themselves in these very precarious situations where they literally die 5 minutes afterwards.
Hmm.
Like we are so self-absorbed, so self-obsessed, that we cannot and refuse to see the world for what it is. And it's interesting.
Okay, I think you're 100% sniffing along the right trail. I think you're right. So if what you're saying is correct, when we are children, preteens, and teenagers, we kind of have a messed up value system by default. So it's kind of like an original sin type of thing when it comes to like what we cherish in other people. So let's say you're 14 years old, you value your physical acumen, like how many guys you can beat up, how many girls can you be with, making mad money or whatever it is, right? So like you have your adolescent value system of like physical prowess, being with women, making money, just dominance, maybe playing cruel jokes on others. Okay, so that's the adolescent values that will bring you cachet. Where the issue is that maybe in previous times, and again, maybe I'm having a romanticized, idea of this, is that you would have your adolescent value system, and by the time that you were in your 20s, definitely by the time you're in your 30s, those should have been subverted already. Like there's something missing in our society where once you turn 21, 22, 23, all of those adolescent values, like, oh yeah, I can beat that guy up, that should already be like kind of squeezed out of your system already, where it's like, oh no, like unnecessary physical violence is not the way to mediate my problems. But we're having there's there's a glitch or there's a bug in the system where now people are turning 25, 26, and they still have the adolescent value system installed in their BIOS, and that's causing them to still watch like YouTube videos of like people, beating each other up at a Walmart or whatever it is. What the heck happened? Why is it that we had a system where the childish adolescent values were squeezed out of you like a sponge in your 20s, and then you became like a functional adult? It seems like we're not there's an issue going on where we're not squeezing those things out as effectively as we used to.
No, because we've ascribed to certain philosophies, we've ascribed to certain psychological uh, how you say, beliefs that many of us believe that our children are just perfect as they are and should be allowed to pick their own truth and their own path and so forth. And well, in a world where everybody's picking their own truth, well, let's just say that there's not really going to be much truth. So at the end of the day, people just do allow things to allow kids to grow up to be whatever the hell they want to be. And I don't know if you know this about kids, but they're not really great at making decisions. So to believe that a child is capable of making a decision of that will impact them for the rest of their life, who they will be, and who they are. Child can barely decide whether or not he or she wants a strawberry or a chocolate popsicle. You wanted to make a decision of who they will be and allow it to go that way. No, it's do not be surprised. Do not be surprised when you have created a generation of narcissists, a generation of murderers, a generation of fools, and a generation that is filled with utter anger and hatred. Because if that is their truth, and you told them to speak their truth or walk in their truth, that is their truth, then who the hell are you to come tell them otherwise now?
So essentially the adolescent truth is never being challenged. One of the traditional mechanisms of challenging adolescent value systems is shame. And right, like shame is the number one mechanism of like, hey man, like I'll give you an example. Let's say you're 28 years old and you're at a party and you say something like, just like you're just really nasty, or just well, I think we would call these things fox pot, like what's it called when you break like a social etiquette or something. So if there's a very rigid version. Yeah, say it again.
They call it a faux pas.
Yeah, faux pas. Thank you. Right, that was the word. So there were you would commit one of these things, and there would be a little bit of shame that was there, and some people think that's bad. Like, come on, man, just let it slide. But it actually encouraged you to become a better version of yourself, because you were like, oh man, that was highly insensitive of what I said, or hey man, like that was incredibly selfish how I just like drank 3 bottles of wine by myself in a corner. like that was like and like these kind of these mechanisms of shame were positive because they taught you a valuable lesson. Like, hey, when you go over to a party, you don't just consume all the alcohol and, throw a pillow across the room and then and go up to the stereo system and put whatever music you like. There's other people at this party, and you kind of have to be mindful of them. And what would happen is that you would not be invited back to that party. People would be like, hey man, you need to grow up a little bit.
Experience.
You would be there and people would be like, hey man, I think you need to grow up a little bit. Or they probably wouldn't even say anything. They would just stop inviting you. And then this was a positive thing, because then you would reflect and then you would become a better version of yourself. A lot of those things have kind of slipped. They've gone the way of the dinosaur. So now these values, like the values are never being refined. And then on top of it, they're also being celebrated in our popular culture. So I'll give you an example. Like in the past, maybe like amongst really professional academics, if someone used a like ad hominem attack, like a personal attack, people would be like, ooh, this guy's losing, right? So if you and I were engaged in a debate and then I just was like, well, you're a silly poo-poo pants, everyone listening would be like, oh, well, Aaron's clearly losing. Look at him. He has to like resort to like childish name calling. So clearly he's the loser of the battle. That's how people traditionally marked out if someone was losing. Nowadays, if I call you a silly poo-poo head, people are like, yeah, like that. So like basically we're unable to call out people who are not fighting properly, who are not like becoming a more refined, better version, because we've lost the palate to assess what is superior argument, what is superior wisdom, as opposed to inferior argument. It's more of a like, might makes right kind of situation that we're in right now.
Yeah, this is idiocracy. We're finally living it. Oh yes. No, I think you're right. It's things are changing very quickly. We're prone. The popular way is a very strange way. The popular way is a very strange way. Now we're not talking. I mean, there's still ways to be popular and really stay like just be and be a human being, like especially who you are as actually as you are, who you are as a human being. But most ways you have to contort yourself into a creature of very ridiculous, a strange creature. You have to contort yourself into fit the popular mode. I think things are changing very quickly. What it means to be popular is changing very quickly. But the question is, will it change back? Do these things we think these things usually have a way of going full circle? And if it will change back, how long will it take? But this is the world we're living in for the meantime.
I hope there is a rubber band effect, because you and I have both read a lot of 19th century literature, like A Tale of Two Cities, Jane Austen, and so forth. And what I notice in these like Victorian era books, if there's a social gathering and some guy comes in drunk and insults all of the people at the party, he's typically the villain of the book. And he's typically like ostracized by society, right? They'll be like, oh, how uncouth of you, sir. And he's completely rejected. And today it's the complete opposite. The guy who comes into the party, curses everyone out, and gets drunk, he's like the anti-hero that we're like, yeah, you show him, you tell those people at the party. And at first it sounded cool, like, yeah, like these Victorian era forms of etiquette are too rigid and we need to rebel against them. But now we've rebelled so much that the person who is breaking into the party and cursing everyone out, he's not actually saying anything that's wise or uplifting. He's not like challenging some like negative thing about society. He's just being a fool, and we're celebrating foolishness. So how do we get like, what is it going to take before the rubber band snaps back into place?
Um, that's a good question. What is it going to take? I don't know. I don't know. I think it has to snap until it breaks. It has to snap until it has to stretch until it breaks. Because it has to take something. It has to take something big enough that people wake up. So I can't say. Even if I could say, I don't know that I would say Aaron, because I don't even want to imagine what it would take for people to wake up.
I'm going to throw out a solution here before we close out.
Let me hear it.
I think what's going to happen is that we have a lot of popular people that are buffoons, but there have been no consequences celebrating buffoonery, right? We've had buffoons that we worship, but nothing really bad seems to happen. We pay attention to these buffoons, but they tend to fizzle out. I think what it's going to take for the rubber band to snap into place is that a buffoon comes to power and people lose their life. In a really substantial way. I think once a buffoon takes over, lives are lost, people's lives are completely destroyed in a way that we cannot repair. It's beyond repair. People are going to be like, geez, we need to start listening to some of the wise people in the room again. Kenny, thank you so much for being here. I certainly don't feel any more popular, but that's okay. We're popular in a very, 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 very small circle.
You're
Thank you,
popular in my book, Aaron.
thank you, my friend. Take care.
Take care, my brother. Thank you for having me.
This concludes the 168th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.